Let me welcome my guest then in our Bloemfontein studio, Paul Colditz. He is the chairperson of the Federation of School Governing Bodies. Very good morning to you, Paul. Thank you once again for coming through to the forum at 8.
Thank you, Kolani, and good morning to you and all the listeners.
Much appreciated. Mashadi Modisha, principal of the Mosesane-Baloi Primary School in the rural Waterberg district of Limpopo, is on the line. Mashadi, good morning.
Good morning, Kolani, and good morning, listeners.
Thank you very much. Let me start with Paul. Paul, again, the preparations, as I understand it, are underway for the elections. How big are these elections?
Well, Kolani, it's usually said that it is the third largest election in the country, but I believe it's the largest and, in fact, the most important, considering the fact that we almost have 25,000 public schools in the country, where you'll on average have about 12 school governors, meaning that we have to elect almost 300,000, which consist of a majority of parents. So roughly about 200,000 parents need to be elected. And if you compare that simply in terms of numbers with the national and provincial and even local governance elections, then this is the most important and largest as far as I'm concerned.
When does it take place? March?
It takes place in March. The coastal provinces will probably start their elections, and some have already indicated that they'll start their elections on the 27th of February because they're closing a week earlier. But generally, all over the country, for the first time in history, by the way, these elections will take place in one period, and that is the month of March.
And I guess there's this tendency, perhaps partly because of ignorance about the importance of these elections, but also partly because of people just don't want to get involved here, of people not wanting to be part of this election. What are your experiences, Paul?
Well, certainly we have a very low turnout normally at many of our schools as far as the voting itself is concerned, and then people don't really want to make themselves available. We need all the skills we can get. People tend to criticize the education department, the education system, the performance of schools. But if we realize that, as the minister pointed out in her address when she announced the elections, there is a direct correlation between the functionality of a school and the functionality of an SGB. So if we can get the people with the knowledge, skills, experience onto school governing bodies, we can make a huge difference to the performance of our schools in this country.
But take us through some of the responsibilities, some of the key responsibilities that school governing bodies are entrusted with.
Well, they're responsible for the financial management of the schools. They're responsible for the management of the assets, including buildings and grounds. They are responsible for discipline. They're responsible for the determination of a number of policies, language policy, admission policy, code of conduct, religious observance policies. They're responsible for the determination of the mission statement of the school. Basically, the school governing body is responsible for creating a framework in which quality education can be delivered. And that is indeed a very wide responsibility, and a responsibility that I must be quite honest about. It takes a lot of time from parents, and parents are not remunerated for their services. But it is a singular privilege to make this contribution as a school governor, because one can say at the end of the day, I have contributed to making a difference in my community's school.
The last time you were here, we were talking about language, and again, you have people complaining about languages that schools choose, yet people don't want to participate in SGBs and decide on the language policies.
Exactly, and that is why these elections need to be representative of the school community, so that the whole school community can feel that it is included in the process of determination of policies at the school. We very often hear from people that the majority are excluded, etc., etc. But if that happens, it means the majority did not participate in this democratic process of having their legitimate leaders elected to the school governing body who can speak on their behalf.
Let me bring in Mashadi then, as a principal of a rural school, really. What are your experiences about the participation of the local communities? Are people eager to participate in school governing bodies?
Yes, sir. They are eager to participate in the school's development. I mean, when we call them, the parents, they do come, more especially those who are not working. But those who are working, only the grandparents and the guardians, they do come.
There's a sad reality about what we've just said, because those are working usually are the ones that have certain skills that would be necessary in the execution of certain responsibilities by the SGBs. I'm not suggesting that those who aren't working necessarily don't have any skills.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. That everyone needs to pull together here.
Yeah, but the thing is, when we call them for election, they do come, and then because we need their skills, there are those who are prepared to be elected at the governing body to participate and help us in the regard of the running of the school, the management, the governance. They do come.
Mashadi, again, as far as I understand, schools, particularly principals, have already been asked to prepare. How are the preparations in your school, for instance?
The thing is, we have already started by nominating the one who's going to run the election at the school governing body when we do elections. And then from there, we are going to call the parents so that we can workshop them how to elect, and then whom do we think maybe they've got a heart for school. We want their expertise, we want their skills to help us to run the schools.
Paul, again, just take us through the process. I think Mashadi alluded to the processes that are involved, like nominations, then what comes afterwards.
Well, first of all, Kolani, the first thing that needs to happen is that schools must inform parents 21 days prior to the nomination and election meeting of the fact that the election will take place, call for nominations. That is done by way of a letter posted to the parents. Then 14 days before the election, learners must be handed the same notice with a request to hand it to their parents. And then 7 days prior to the meeting and up till 24 hours before the meeting, the nominations can take place. People can nominate parents to be elected to the governing body. That's for the parent component only. The parents must be nominated by other parents who are eligible to vote as parents in their capacity as parents. And then there are certain exclusions, which for the present moment I don't think is very important. The main issue is that the parent must be, or the nominee must be, a parent at the school, and the South African Schools Act defines parents. It's the biological parent, the adoptive parent, legal guardian, person who has been given the responsibility by a court of law for the child, and then lastly a person who towards the school undertakes the responsibility for the education of the child that the parent would normally have. Those are people who would be qualified to be nominated.
You know, I'm not sure whether people generally aren't participating because of time, or simply because people don't know the importance of the SGBs, don't know why they should be participating. So I would like to hear what people's reasons and excuses, if there are any, are.
So, Annie, can I quickly come in on
Sure.
that particular comment? And that is, we find that parents think they can outsource the responsibility for the education of their children, and therefore they just deliver the children at school and leave it up to school to educate their children. Parents remain the primary educators of their children. They are primarily responsible for the education of their children. We cannot afford to outsource the future of our children, and that is why it is so important that parents should participate in this process.
Somebody has sent me an SMS, for instance, Paul, and I'm going to ask you to respond to this, because they're saying in a particular school, that particular school doesn't want parents to meet the SGBs. Is that possible? Is that possible that a school can then say to parents, you will not be able to meet the SGB?
No, it's impossible. Number one, the law requires of parents to elect a parent component to the SGB, and as I've already indicated, in terms of the law, the parent component of the SGB should be in the majority, one more than the rest of the representatives on the SGB. That is the principal, the educators, non-educators, and in secondary schools, elected learners. So parents, number one, in terms of the law, must be in the majority. Secondly, the law also requires of SGBs to report to parents annually, at least once, in some provinces twice, on exactly the performance of the school and the performance of the SGB. So in terms of the law, there must be this interaction between parents and SGBs and schools.
Somebody says, most of the SGBs are not effective because they listen to the principal without questioning. They do not understand their responsibilities. My guest will respond to you in a second. Kosh says, do the SGBs have any say when there is irregular attendance of teachers? Tando Etinaha says, why is everything wrong always associated with SATU? Should the failure of the SGBs be because of SATU? Another one, of course, I read this one from May, who says it's quite important to point out that parents are not paid when they get elected to the SGBs. Let me introduce my other guest then. Palesa Tyobeka, who is the Deputy Director General, Teachers, Education and Human Resources and Institutional Development, Head of the Delivery Unit at the Department of Basic Education. Palesa Tyobeka, nice talking to you again.
Thank you, Kolani. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks indeed. Well, lots of questions already have been asked here, but here's another one that seems to be coming through in most of the SMSs in terms of the roles and who is actually the boss between the principal and the SGBs.
Kolani, the roles are different. The principal is responsible for the management of the school, academic program, and things like that. But the governors are responsible for governance. But like Paul is saying, governors have such an important role because they have an overall responsibility to ensure that things run properly at the school. And it's a service that we can all offer. And the reason why you take in parents of children who are at the school is that you believe that every parent wants the best for their child. And we've seen, so there is no real contradiction, but we've also seen, and this is a thing that I picked up when I listened to the conversation that has been raised, that where we have parents who really give and are committed to what is happening in the school, the results simply improve.
Yeah.
And it's not really about hard skills, Kolani. I've heard many people saying we must try and select carefully. I think the core, what we truly want in a school governing body is somebody who believes that things must change in education and is willing to give the time to work with the school and other parents to make sure that their child and the children in the community get what we're being paid for as the Department of Education. It can be everywhere to monitor, but if they're there, they can ensure that we as officials do what we're supposed to be doing to support the schools with resources of teachers. They can be there to make sure that teachers are there on time, they're teaching, all of those things. There's lots more, but therefore you can't exclude people, maybe because they haven't gone to school. We have seen in many places, in Soweto, parents who were not particularly educated decided that they'd had enough when teachers were playing games in some schools in Soweto, and they put that to an end. We've seen the same in Tembisa. Those are not former model C schools. Those are ordinary schools with ordinary parents. So all we can say, and you did make the point, this is possibly one of the biggest things that parents can do for themselves, for their children, and for this country, to make themselves available. We get wrong people in these school governing bodies simply because parents don't bother to come. And therefore, it's not deliberate on anybody's part to put in parents who don't do anything for the school, but they end up being the only ones at the meeting and then voted in.
That's an important point, because a little earlier on, Funani made a point about, I think it was talking about townships in the Eastern Cape, that you elect somebody to be a chairperson simply because Utatu Gwala walks up and down with an obkiri and is a feared guy in the neighborhood, but he doesn't quite contribute to the kind of things that you would want at the SGB, because the SGB makes very important and serious decisions. We started there.
Well, that's why I'm saying parents must take this seriously. Parents must know that if they put in Ubab Gwala, they will get what Babakwala is able to deliver or not deliver. And it's the future of their children. Parents must take their children, and I'm glad, in fact, it's beginning to happen, Polani, because I think this whole country is beginning to hold us in the Department of Education and everybody else who is at a school, be it principal or teacher. The noises that the country is beginning to make, people are saying we've had enough, and we're encouraging parents at a local level to also say we have had enough, we'll be here ourselves and understand what is happening and be part of the school governments. That's the only way things can change. But if there are there are two parents at the meeting, and we end up getting up to the school, to the quorum that's needed. But parents must come and vote and choose the right SCP.